Creative Name 3 in chat asks, are there any treasure games you like, since you don't like platformers?
Gunstar Heroes is okay. That's the only one I can even think of off the top of my head as far as like treasure games are concerned. Like, you gotta bear in mind, this entire generation of 16-bit consoles, I really do write off. I think that, you know, most of this shit is primitive to a point where it's just absolutely inaccessible. At least there's like a beauty in the simplicity of the 8-bit era by comparison. I'm trying to... Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that. There are definitely games that are like, oh, we've got this more advanced system, we can do more ambitious games, and that's usually their downfall. Like, anytime we cover, especially on Chance Time, like bad SNES games, it's always like, oh yeah, we could do these big scrolling maps. It's like, yeah, but that's not fun. So don't do that.
I'll say this, like, a big problem with this generation of platformer, why, like, the SNES platformers becoming a running joke is where they start to integrate verticality into platformers. Yeah. In the NES era, in the 8-bit era, it is mostly, like, one-directional. It's unidirectional, right? You're moving left to right, and if you're going up or down, it is in the context of, like, you know, usually there's a screen transition. Just because of the way that hardware worked, right? That, you know, scrolling in both directions was not always tenable. Was technologically difficult. You know, there's a reason why, like, Super Mario Bros. 3, when it pulled that feat off, was seen as doing something impressive. And, you know, they did it in a very limited capacity. Which is to say that, you know, they had to cut off the edges of the screen to facilitate it, because, like, the overscan would have had, like, flashing lights to facilitate that, because it's the way, like, the tile maps work. It's a whole thing. And also, like, they weren't, like, going too vertically tall. Stages would not be, like, giant in that way. If there was any, like, upper portion to it, it'd be very limited. It'd be in the clouds, and it wouldn't be the, like, entire, like, parallel layer to the primary stage. I'm gonna rewind there because I want to see whatever that pickup was. That was obfuscated by the foreground. But then when you get into this generation, and you get the era of, like, the proper collectathon, where stages are too goddamn big for their own goddamn good, where you're like, doing these treks across these labyrinthian hellscapes to try and collect every, like, pertinent item in a stage. Oftentimes, requirements for beating a stage are tied directly to completely collecting and exploring every nook and cranny of a stage to an extent that is absolutely egregious and has no value for your time as a player. Versus, like, you know, at least in an 8-bit game, for the most part, it is just, how much of the stage do you want to play? How much stage do you want to bother with? And, you know, then there's also, like, the egregious foreground elements that we constantly joke about, where, you know, people discovered parallax scrolling in this generation and used, I mean, it exists in the 8-bit era, but, you know, this is the generation where it's used to particularly egregious effect.
Yeah,
also,
yeah,
these
the
games just
foreground
move
stuff.
so fucking slow in a way that I don't care for. You know, barring, like, a Sonic, which, you know, original Sonic moves fucking slow, like, make no mistake. You're punished for moving fast in those games unless you have, like, a memorization of all the obstacles and enemies that they will put in your way as you attempt to move fast. Most of those games are just like platformers. They mostly stop you with their verticality as you are, like, forced to come to an abrupt stop in order to figure out, like, well, I'm going to have to circumnavigate this in such and such a way, or push this block into place, or activate this switch, this lever, wait for a platform, a floating platform to move into place so that I can, you know, actually continue in my playthrough of this level. That sort of stuff that, you know, is just not for me. I get it. I understand the appeal of something like this, but it could not be me. I have at least a little more tolerance for 3D platformers where you can, like, you know, use the magic of perspective to look ahead and to understand, like, what situation you're about to get yourself into. Right? Where you can, like, scope out what's ahead of you. You know, if you had, like, a hedge maze, you could look over the top of the hedge maze, theoretically. But, you know, it's just a lot of waiting, a lot of busy work, a lot of just all the bullshit that I most detest in video games, personified by the platformer genre, and in particular, the 16-bit era of it, when this design was at some of its absolute most egregious. You know, the points that you always make about, like, games that were designed to be anti-rental machines, that were designed to have just deliberately obtuse bullshit for the incredibly specific purpose of making it so you couldn't beat the game in a single sitting in your first time
and
through
to be clear, that's not a defense of that design choice or anything, because that's super mean and anti. You never should be designing stuff to intentionally. Yeah, I don't tend to like the term artificial difficulty, but in that case, you're getting into like making your game worse territory. Just like, oh yeah, we could make this clearer. We could make it so that you don't need pre knowledge you won't have. But you know, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, like that is the thing. Like when I do think to the Super Nintendo platformers, I do like there actually aren't that many, and it is mostly just it's the ones Nintendo made, because Nintendo wouldn't get into a lot of that more like big open areas and like open platforming explore levels. And when they did do that with Super Metroid, it has a fucking map.
Oh, fuck off.
And it has
assholes.
Oh, that was real mean. Yeah, speaking of.
So yeah, I'll never be able to fully appreciate this style of game because it's just so antithetical to the things that I come to video games for personally. But I know we have fans who are fans of this garbage, right? I know we have like a cool spot defender, Immersion Doof, in the Discord, who shows up in chat occasionally. Shout out to Immersion Doof. Shout out to our Discord, discord.gg/BGHOF. It's great that people can tolerate me being so down on this entire genre, on this entire era, really. Because I just can't think of like any game that is improved by being on 16-bit hardware versus 8-bit hardware or 32. I fell for the same thing. But watch, I did have a balloon here, which does give me like a save. It is basically a get out of pit free thing. But I also picked it up the first time through. Yeah. I picked it up. That was the first power up we got in this level. Why didn't it save me the first time?
Weird.
When I fell down that pit. Like RPGs on the 16-bit hardware just move slow as molasses. Some of the grind heaviest games of their, of the genre.
Yeah,
for just like an example.
Yeah. As I mentioned, a lot of the Super Nintendo RPGs did not come out here. We weren't allowed them until way later.
I think of like, some of the worst driving games you'll ever play because of like Mode 7 bullshit on the SNES.
Yeah,
generic behind the back. Just like shit that the hardware was not equipped for.
Yeah. I mean, I can gel with original Outrun for a bit. In terms of like a behind-the-back pseudo 3D thing. There just aren't many, if any, good examples of home console games that really did a good job emulating that. Maybe like some Road Rash games, like a couple of them. But not many.
Can you read Salem Tenebre's comment?
Oh, yeah. They have... Yeah, Salem... Tenebre says they have a very similar feeling towards Call of Duty and other modern military shooters, which I remember Cass saying they play and enjoy.
I did enjoy. I'm very much burnt out on them now, to be clear. But,
oh, yeah,
what I appreciate is immediacy. What I appreciate are
yeah.
games that just don't waste my time, right? Like, time to me is precious. I live a busy life, believe it or not. And so, for me, like, a thing I place a premium on is just like getting like instant gratification, instant satisfaction out of games, which is not for everyone, and definitely like, is antithetical to a lot of like, like slow, deliberate design that absolutely has its place. Like, I am not an unbiased, I am not someone who you should go to for your personal video game opinions. Like, I know history. I feel like I'm fair and generous when it comes to like giving games like their due in terms of like the history or understanding circumstances of like development or what have you. But there are just genres that I fundamentally think are just boring, time-wasting, etc. When it comes to the Call of Duty stuff, like, yeah, I absolutely understand. Like, especially like military-industrial complex being what it is. If your bugbear with like a Call of Duty is the fact that it's made like, in conjunction with the U.S. Army, I'm not gonna be the one to like to fucking defend that shit. That's absolutely not the case. Or if it's just like, if it's too like on a rail for you, if it's too like set piece driven, if it doesn't feel like you actually have any influence on the actual plot. Fair criticisms. There's lots of fair criticisms to have of that style of game, right? I don't exist in like a vacuum. I'm not ignorant to the arguments against my own personal preferences and what have you. God, this is... I see what I'm supposed to do here, but my timing, my sense of timing is off. Yeah.